Hi, and welcome to the Sapphire Nation podcast. I'm Sapphire Ed, and here for the month of November 2020 is joining me the unrepressible Shannon Robb from BeQuiet. Shannon, welcome to the podcast.
Am I allowed to talk now?
Yes, you're allowed to talk now.
Oh, sweet. Okay, so first of all, don't use big words with me because I don't know what unrepressible means, but sure. I'm unrepressible as far as Ed's concerned. What's up, everybody?
I guess, Shannon, before we dive into stuff, first,
I thought you said before we die. I'm like, no, please. I have games to play later.
Shannon and I have known each other for what, about 12 years? We met at CES. You were working for Thermaltake with
yes.
What's his name?
Ramsum
Coy. If you guys never got to meet him, that guy was a character.
Oh, yes.
And we can say this now because it's legal. He was a marijuana connoisseur.
That was putting it mildly. Well, in California, he was. Let's just say that, since not all states are now so happy with that. So,
well, he's not even in the States anymore, is he?
No, as a matter of fact, there's a long story to that I'll tell you off air.
Yeah, that's something else. So you now work for BeQuiet. So first, I guess, why don't you give us a little background of BeQuiet and what you do there?
Okay. BeQuiet. I am the North America and Canada. I'm the Canada marketing manager. So I'm pretty much helping BeQuiet get more market presence in USA. It's kind of one of the things I've done in my life through my career. So basically, I just kind of wear the company hat and just be who I am, but try to, make more people aware that we make really cool stuff.
Well, give us, what kind of stuff does BeQuiet make? What are they known for?
Oh, come on, you got to lead me, man. I'm like a goldfish. I
gotta get like a bridle bit out here and lead him around the pasture.
Well,
okay,
that's the thing. By the time I circle the fishbowl, I forget I've been there. So,
okay.
With BeQuiet, we make everything from coolers, especially air coolers, but also some recently released AIO liquid coolers. We make power supplies, all different levels, from crazy high-end that are really expensive all the way to like much more mainstream that are more affordable. And we make chassis, and then we make cooling fans. The focus for it is going to be highest quality along with optimum silence. That's kind of the.
I hope the name.
I was about to say, I really hope it was self-explanatory when you say, besides the fact we're German, so it could be like, be quiet! Could be like that, but it's really not. Like, the company is based in Germany, and I'm sure they're going to be happy to hear that. Especially me faking a German accent, which I cannot do. I'm not like Hans Gruber from the best, by the way, arguably, but not arguably to me, the best Christmas movie ever, Die Hard.
Die Hard's a good movie.
It's absolutely, and it's one of the best Christmas movies, besides maybe National Lampoon's Christmas, but that's another story entirely.
Oh, JM, that's terrible. To me, that's the reason I like him. JM commented, I don't want to sound rude, but I've never been interested in BeQuiet only because there's no RGB. Dude, no RGB is a plus to me.
Okay, but let me tell you, we did dabble slightly in RGB, but we're doing it more tastefully. And where is he saying this? Because I'm in general, and I saw nothing.
Look above us. There's a listener question.
Oh, geez, holy crap!
And that's the live questions.
Oh my God! So Lord Quack has been talking, and I'm just Lord Quack, I am so sorry. Hold on, I gotta type this.
Okay, Shannon's busy typing. Yeah, I like some of the stuff you guys did. In fact, one of your cohorts, I'm not sure where he's from, there was a video BeQuiet posted on YouTube where he took the time to explain the process, how to achieve the best cooling to noise level with case fan speeds. It was an incredible video, by the way. Just an incredible video. And it was funny because that's exactly the process I've been using forever.
Just FYI, I try to type in like an emoji. I have a limit on how quickly I can type. Holy crap, I didn't realize that.
There's a speed limit here because if we do it too fast, we can't read.
We'll get flooded, yeah.
We want to read everybody's comments.
Yay! I now know how to operate a podcast, and I've only been doing this for like over 10 years. Fantastic. We actually have one case that does RGB, and it's the 500DX. It is a fantastic case. It really is. It's basically airflow focused, but it's the Pure Base 500DX, and it has two LED strips going down the front that are ARGB along with an ARGB strip inside. We just don't go like unicorn rainbow with like all different like unicorn puke fans all over. In case you don't notice, like my obsession with RGB includes rainbows or includes unicorns. So
You
that's the
know
thing.
what? If you're going to go RGB, in my opinion, if you're going to go RGB, you go unicorn puke.
That's the thing, and maybe the next one we will. But
So,
that's actually a good question. I do like that. Breaking Dimes actually asked. He said, "When will we see Noctua-like mounting on the Dark Rock Pro Series?" I don't know if you'll see that directly, but that's because they do have a patented mounting design. But we are working on improvising and improving that. So
well,
give us a little time. It's getting better.
I hate to talk about your competition with this, but they're not the only ones that do that. Scythe does a similar
I know.
mounting system.
Oh, they do a similar one. The thing
Yes.
is, when you come down to it, there's a kind of like the same reason that you only see one type of AIO. There are certain things you can
Oh,
and
dude,
cannot
yeah,
do as
that was
far as
ugly.
that is why it still is. That is why that we're being very cautious as we develop it. So just hang in there. That's one of the reasons I'm also here. I am working with the teams that work with our products, and we are working on. You'll see small improvements over the time coming that will make it much better. And also, there's a reason Scythe can get away with that, and that's because of where the company is located. But I won't say that to be disparaging in any way. But Ed, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Hey,
When you have a
speaking of the AIO, Shannon, let's try to get a little on track here. The train is completely.
oh
We're
jeez,
we're trying to be an airplane, dude. We got to be a
is
train.
anybody surprised by this?
So anyway, yeah, Shannon's the first person I've lost complete control with on the podcast. So, and it's been a long time since anybody's done that to me in a broadcast situation.
You're welcome.
Did you watch or have you seen the video by Steve Burke talking about AIO placement, where the radiator and the pump and the heat block are in relationship to each other?
Yeah, mostly
Okay.
has to do with recirculating the air. Yeah, I got you.
Okay. So here's my question: your AIO moved the pump really close to the radiator.
Yes.
What effect is that going to have in a bottom mounted radiator in a case? I mean, the pump obviously isn't going to be at the top, so you're not going to have the issues with the pump running dry. But is there any issue with the potential of that cooling block not getting the flow in it all the way?
Not really. As long as the biggest problem you're going to have is if you have an AIO that's not filled nearly enough.
Right.
And that's why I'm glad someone kind of followed that video up. I'm sure you're familiar with Greg Salazar from Science Studio.
Yes.
He actually just did a video a few days ago confronting this because after that happened, Steve is a great guy. I've known him for a long time.
Yeah.
He does amazing and informational videos that are fantastic. And I'm glad he did that video because it opened up something that really needed to be discussed. And that comes down to the fact that a lot of case pictures, things like that, a lot of the renders, they show it in the wrong direction, in my opinion, wrong direction, because it's what it is. And what happens is if you have a AIO loop that is not filled enough and you have a large enough amount of air,
right,
yes, you can have some major issues. But at the end of the day, even if your radiator's at the bottom, you will see some recirculation and the bubbles will kind of hang about. But at the end of the day, if the pump is somewhat strong enough, it'll push those bubbles back around and usually they'll get caught in the end tanks. But let's say worst case scenario, you do have some air in your AIO, especially after some time. Yeah, you could suffer no matter what your AIO design is. Even a custom loop, if you put your pump and res way low on the loop, you're going to have a problem because what's going to happen is that air is going to trap somewhere, whether it be in your block or like, for instance, in my system, I actually have a top mounted radiator on my custom loop. Just in case any bubbles do get in there, they end up hanging out at the top of the top
right,
radiator, which is not my primary cooling source. But with the decoupled pump that's in the lines, that is more for absorbing sound from the pump than actually mitigating anything. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to mitigate that no matter where your pump is. If you're mounting your radiator wrong and your loop is empty enough, you're going to have troubles. And you'll even have those troubles even with the radiator at top. The thing is, it'll be less likely. But I mean, you've probably heard, especially really older AIOs,
yes,
where you have the radiator at the top and you'll still kind of hear a little zzz on occasion. That's called cavitation. You get bubbles that get caught up in the pump. Well, I mean, you're a Navy guy, so you know all about cavitation.
I know
like
about cavitation.
Yeah, so you get like with props and stuff, you start kicking around air and you cause a bunch of turbulence and noise. But at the end of the day, as long as that pushes out within a couple seconds, you're not going to have a thermal issue.
Well, I've had people ask me about this. They've asked my opinion about this. What I've said is, first, I think what Steve did was a wonderful breakdown of how this works. I
Yep.
think he did a great job, but I think that it got overblown. Look
Well,
at how
that's
many
that.
years we've had these, and this hasn't ever been an issue before.
I actually derailed my own statement that I was replying to you because I meant to circle back on that and say one of the issues was that it came down to Steve's community, and there are some people that take what he says as 100% law, which can be fine.
That's
But
every
if
community.
you go out and attack everyone else who does it differently, that's when it turns toxic. And that's one of the issues we're starting to see is people going out and, like, excuse the term, but crapping on every other like person who looks at something differently. That's kind of where we've wound up now. And that
Yep.
is not healthy for us as a community. And that's one of the reasons you look at like some of these Facebook like PC groups. I'm in a lot of them, and some of them I have to literally mute because I see how badly everything just snowballs into a horrible area, like someone new. Like it's so not welcoming to people who are new to the PC community, and people who, let's say, show their rig and it's like, hey, your AO's installed wrong. Instead of being like, hey dude, you could get a better experience this way, you get like, are you stupid? Watch this video.
Yes.
You're completely
Yes.
wrong. Your system's gonna die. And I'm like, bro, like, cool your jets, man. This guy, he's trying to get help. Let's help him. But I just finally got kind of tired of that because that's what happens. You get these people that just flip the hell out and like have these kind of issues, and they don't really understand the underlying causes. Because like I like that Steve did a cutaway of it. That was actually
Right.
fantastic. The problem is the amount of air he had in that is not 100% representative of most AIOs. There are some that, like, I've heard them over the years. Like, you get one that's not necessarily properly filled.
You can
You
tell
can
it
shake the
gurgles.
radiator. Yeah, you could. Well, you could also shake the radiator and hear like the water sloshing, and it's like, yeah, that's a little underfilled. But even then, usually it will be fine. And that's one of the reasons that we actually took and gave people the ability to top their own off.
And
So therefore,
that
we have
to me is awesome. That's
well,
an
the thing
awesome
is,
feature.
one of the things we don't necessarily highlight really heavily, because depending on the area and depending on how you maintain it, we give enough fluid that it should last about 7 years worth
Yeah, I
of
saw
fluid.
that.
But the thing is, like, if you're depending on your area, obviously thermals and different conditions can affect the low permeation tubing and cause it to, it doesn't, like, people freak out when they hear like low permeation or low evaporation tubing. Any AIO slowly leaches out liquid. That's just the reality. That's physics at work, folks.
Yep.
There's no getting around that. But basically, that stuff's not like going to drip on your video card unless you have a faulty system, which it does happen. You have faulty like AIOs or whatnot that can sometimes leak. It's just the reality. Sometimes you get bad units. But overall, during their life cycle, you will get a certain amount that leaches out, and that's where you start to get empty. So what we did is we implemented a fill port so you can add more liquid to it or top it off to better match what you need. If you have one that's very well topped off, it pretty much, you could mount it any way you want, and as long as you don't, and you're not going to have much bubbles to really recirculate, so
Right.
you're not going to have any effect. But overall, our inline pup design was partially because we didn't want to have to deal with the constraints of a said company that loves to
I
patent control
understand
for
that.
their
I
designs.
understand that.
And we, more than anything, wanted the quiet. We wanted the quiet factor of it. We wanted to be able to have a pump it's basically mounted with two different sides, have the low permeation rubber tubing on it, which absorbs all the vibration. The
By
other
the
thing
way,
is yeah, go ahead.
You go ahead and finish up your thought.
Well, JM, I got to say, you're probably going to be very sad because Pure Loop does not have RGB. It is a white pump head with brushed aluminum appearance cover.
So I was going to say, for those of you just joining us that have never heard Shannon speak, no, he has not been wound up. No, he does not have a vibrator stuck on his body to get him going. No, he is not full of caffeine or drugs. This is Shannon.
Oh, I've had YouTube videos from CES where some dude said, "How much cocaine did this guy do before this interview?" and then thank goodness, because I'm thinking like, oh my god, like what happened? They know. Oh wait, sorry, no.
Yeah, this is just Shannon.
One of them actually after said, "I'm so happy to see a guy that's so excited and likes his product so much." And I'm like, "Thank you. That's vindicating." Since some guy just alleged that I was like just doing rails of cocaine at CES, which, let's face it, it's Vegas, so I mean,
Who
it could have
knows?
possibly. It could have happened with somebody, but it wasn't me.
There
Just
you go.
saying.
So you mentioned that BeQuiet makes both air and closed loop coolers. For the
Yes.
typical gamer, and the reason I'm going to ask you this is many of you may not know this. Shannon used to be really involved, and he may still be, in the high-end overclocking community, liquid nitrogen level stuff.
Yes.
For the average PC gamer, the guy who's not trying to build the monster $3,000 box, is there really an advantage of one over the other for their builds?
I would say more than anything, I think an air cooler will do the job for most anybody, unless you're like pushing an overclock or you're doing anything that will push you outside of that, or you just want, because the thing is, with air cooler and liquid coolers, they both will reach a similar static temperature once you saturate the liquid, the water.
Right.
I call it water because there is additives in it to keep it from corroding, because most of the AIO radiators are aluminum. And so anyone who knows water cooling knows aluminum and copper is bad juju unless you have like proper fluid that will keep the keep the difference in anodic index from causing galvanic corrosion. So, wow, I probably shouldn't go through like the whole chemistry side of things.
Everybody's eyes just glazed over.
Okay, so basically, we don't want everything to eat itself inside.
Right.
And normally with mixed metals, you'll get everything will start chewing each other up because you create electrolysis with the water. So that being said, where were we going? Oh yeah, basically the water saturates and you end up with the same temperatures as air coolers. The difference is the air cooler just gets that temperature and the air blows it away. It works for convection, pushes the heat out.
Right.
That's just the reality of it. The same thing happens. The only difference is you're moving that. I think more than anything, you're moving the torsional force, the leverage force, off of your motherboard by having a heavy air cooler. Instead, you're mounting a radiator to your chassis.
Right.
And that's where most people will see a benefit. However, that, in my opinion, is a marginal benefit. But what you can do is you can raise the amount of time before that saturation takes place. Because if you ever test like a very top end cooler, whether it's like a Dark Rock Pro 4, something like that, and you throw that up versus like any 240, even 360 radiator, like AIO cooler, you're going to notice that the temperature after, especially if you're running like an extended, like long-term gaming,
right,
like for a couple hours, you're going to see quite similar temps. You might see a couple degrees cooler simply because you have more overall surface area, depending on how many radiators you have. But that's not going to be large enough. Mostly it's because people don't want to run like large, loud coolers or a lot of fans. So you run a radiator with some lower speed or lower noise fans. And that's where we try to make our air coolers much quieter by having things like our Silent Wings fans or, some of our silent profile fans that keep it from really ramping up unless you've got like just a super hot chip. Like if you're running something like a 2090WX, well, good luck, have fun, with your space heater, because that's going to be awesome.
Well, there's also, I think the enthusiast market has just gone completely nuts and off the rails when it comes to talking about temperature. And what I mean by that is they freak out about the worst things. First, I see people freaking out about idle temperatures. Idle temperatures are meaningless. They don't matter because idle isn't where you're going to. If you've got a stupid idle temperature like 80C, you've got a problem.
But that means you forgot to remove the plastic cover on the cooler.
Put the cooler on.
Or that.
It's the load temperatures, but even the load temperatures. Okay, so I talked about this. I've done two different small form factor builds. One's with an AIO, one's with an air cooler. I've managed to tweak the noise levels into pretty much identical under load.
Yeah.
The difference is with the AIO, my 3600 runs at about, under gaming load, about 65C. And under gaming load with the air cooler, it's running about 72C. And people are freaking out. They're like, oh my God, it's getting up to 72C. Can't you see? 72C doesn't mean shit. It's irrelevant. It's not throttling.
Well, that's the other thing is I think also people need to understand like the lithography, like how the God, I really don't want to go too technical with this. How the chips are made. They, like, for instance, like people look at VRM temps like, oh my goodness, you're over 60, it's gonna explode. And it's like, dude, those ICs are designed to handle like 150C.
Right.
Like they're perfectly fine. It's like back in the day when you had like the 290X. Remember those things?
Yes.
Those things were stupidly hot, like especially on the reference design. But the thing is, the silicon was designed to run that way. It was designed to handle those temperatures. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of it running that hot. I mean, you remember, as a matter of fact, we were friends all the way. We were friends
Yes.
long before that. But you remember I told you I had a reference AMD 290X that melted
An
my HDMI
HDMI
cable that
port.
was in it.
Yes.
And I'm like,
And
how
he
the
sent me
hell would I?
video, guys. This isn't hyperbole. He sent me a video of this.
It melted my HDMI cable and the monitor. The monitor turned brown that was behind it because it was pushing like 89, 92 C air out the back of it. And I'm like, this is, and I'm in my mind, I'm the same enthusiast. I'm going, this is the worst card design ever. Then I realized the card ran perfectly fine through those temps. You just need like some, I don't know, like some NASA level HDMI cables apparently. By the way, I have said so many things about coolers leaking. I do got to say, JM was in the chat questions. He was like, I'm scared of water cooling. Don't be scared of water cooling. I'm just saying mistakes can happen. Things can, but you're talking like this is a 1 in a few 100,000 thing. It's not going to, your AIO, if you were to get one, the chance of it leaking, you're more likely to be able to buy like a brand new card that just released than you are of an AIO leaking on you.
Well, it's a factor to consider. The more points of failure you have, exponentially, the chance of failure drastically increases. But you got to take that as a relative account. Okay, so you look at an air cooler, and
Yep.
you take the fan out of the equation because the failure rate on fans on both is the same. You take the fan out of the equation. There's only one way really for an air cooler to fail, and that's if it somehow dries up or the little bit of liquid in that heat pipe gets out. That's the only way it can really fail.
Well, that's the thing. I have seen where heat pipes have burst. I've had one actually do it. It was it was the Tunique Tower, actually. If you remember that old cooler. Like we're talking way old now. You remember Tunique back in the day? Okay, I had a Tunique Tower. One of the heat pipes ruptured when I was testing some overclocking. Like I was pre-binning chips.
Yes.
We're talking back like 775 days. I was pre-binning E8400s E8600s at the time. And I was binning for LN2. I binned probably 150 chips, and right around chip number 90-ish, one of the things burst. I just hear this little, and then all of a sudden I see this like white buildup on the edge of the heat pipe, and the chip starts getting a bit warmer, and I'm like, uh-oh. Pull the cooler, and one of the ends that they had crimped had just let go. So I mean, you could get failures no matter what. I mean, the same way like you have an inductor on a graphics card, like we won't go over that earlier, but you get an inductor on a graphics card. You ever hear like where you end up in a menu at 5,000 FPS because some games still today don't cap menu FPS.
Which is crazy.
And next thing you know, you hear that, and someone's like, oh my God, my graphics card's failing. It's like, no, it's just going, oh my God, I'm under so much stress, I don't know what to do.
Exactly.
But that's the thing. When you're pushing like that, it's, it's not necessarily, sometimes things happen, whether it's a graphics card, CPU, it doesn't matter. Sometimes things fail.
Let's put you on the spot with something, Shannon, because Breaking Dimes brought up an interesting point. If we buy one of your AIOs and it does leak and damage a product in our computer, does your warranty cover the damage caused by the leak?
That's something I would actually have to check. I have not looked at that. I'll be honest and say at this point I don't know, but I will actually.
I'd prefer to hear I don't know than bullshit.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you, dude. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know. I never looked at that, and that's because we just released these coolers. So I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, the thing is, we're a pretty stand-up place. We're not going to screw people because, we're not necessarily like the leaders of the market, so to speak. I mean, we are like the PSU leader in Germany, but we're just getting introduced in USA. And the fact is, if something was to leak, most companies will cover that. If they don't, then they're probably a really shitty company and should be ostracized. That's just the reality.
I don't disagree with you.
If you have a product that fails, I think, in my opinion, if you can prove that like a PSU somehow, let's say a main cap blew or something like a bridge, like let's say something shorted and caused like 12 volts to go straight to something that should be like 3.3. Let's say something internally bridged and your 5-volt rail on your board suddenly gets 12 volts and you fry some stuff. If that was to happen, which is extremely unlikely, for the most part, they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, okay, you know what, let's figure it out. And they're going to figure out a creative solution to get you taken care of. But I don't want to say, like, as far as company policy, I won't speak to that because I just don't know. But I would say that if something like that was to happen, if they were to work with me or one of the guys I work with that's in our service team, I'm pretty sure would figure out a way to get you taken care of.
Well, there you go.
And
That's a fair enough answer.
that's just, I mean, I don't want to BS you, bro, but I
I
don't see that being a realistic scenario where we would ever turn something like that away. I've seen some things we've done. I don't want to say too much, but I've seen some things we've done through service when someone was unhappy about something. We've taken care of people, because that's one thing I will say. I'm happy I joined BeQuiet because, Ed, you know some of the experiences I've been through
Yes.
in my career.
Yes.
This is one of the companies that, you know what, I've actually been very happy being here, because you know what, you know how many companies. I mean, you've worked a decent part of your life.
Oh yeah, I've got 30
And
years in this industry.
and you know that there are some companies that you're a number.
Yes.
But this is one of those companies you kind of like, what they call fabled companies, where you hear that they actually give a damn about how you're doing, how your family's doing, whatnot.
Yes.
And that's what makes me know that, like, you know, they're not gonna stiff people. That's just not how they work. That's just, I've seen it from internally. They actually give a damn about what people think. And that's why I'm sitting here talking to you guys, because they brought me on, because they know that I give a damn about what people think. And they want me to make sure that people know that they give a damn about what they think, and that they like that, you know, that we want people to like our products. We want people to like us. And we want, more than anything, to know what can we do to make products better. Because as great of ideas as I may have, all it takes is someone like JM, Breaking Dimes, one of the guys in here, they could easily say, why don't you guys do this? And I may look at it and go, you know, that makes sense. And next thing you know, a year down the line, you may see a product that comes along that they're more happy with. And that's our whole goal here.
Right. All right. So I've quoted you over the years on this. Remember the conversation you and I had years back about overclocking?
Oh, no.
I've quoted
Okay.
you over the years, so I'm going to get these people to hear it where it's not me quoting you, you actually saying it. Is today, for a typical PC gamer, overclocking worth the extra costs and trouble?
I would say no.
Okay.
That's just right now, especially like a good example. And this is a perfect example, actually. Something like, let's say, Ryzen 5000. You can static overclock, or even 10900K. Let's take the Ryzen 5900X, which is going to be, in my opinion, 5900X or 5600X are probably going to be your top gaming SKUs for people. For the EP users, they're going to want 5900X, 5950X, but for everyone who has a reasonable thought, will probably be 5600X.
Right.
You're going to take that. The algorithms they're putting in place for these chips to boost forward or to boost up is so good that normally when you overclock them, you're actually going to lose some single thread performance, because you're not going to push to that single thread capability. Right. And a lot of the stuff you do every day in Windows and whatnot work extremely well on single thread. Like they get that quick boost to get, you know, some low QD files, things like that, and pull things across. When you're overclocking, you're creating more heat load, you're pulling more power. Most of the time, it won't even be used, because you're sitting, let's say, watching a YouTube video, watching a Twitch stream, playing a game. You might see a slight, I mean, we're talking 0.1% difference, and you know, we're versus 10 to 25% increase in power and thermals. You're talking, unless you're running an extremely old rig where you have to overclock it just to not severely bottleneck your GPU, it's just not worth it. For anyone with current gen hardware, it doesn't make sense. Does that match?
Yeah,
does that match what you've been quoting me? Yeah.
What I've been trying to tell people is it's also a matter of relativity. Okay, if your current rig is already getting 130 frames per second in Witcher 3, for example, and that's your big game, that's what you're playing, buying the new hardware to get to 160 frames per second or overclocking to get to 140 frames per second isn't going to meaningfully impact your gaming experience. You're never going to notice it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like let's say, like, for instance, myself, I'm running 4K 144 hertz.
Okay.
So that's not mainstream by any means.
Man, he's got first world problems.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, honestly, but this is I'm actually reinforcing your point. My rig right now, I play PUBG a lot, because apparently I like being killed by hackers, but that's another story for another time. I play that a lot with my friends. I get at 4K, I get about 160 to 270 FPS. Now, I cap the game at my monitor's refresh rate simply because it doesn't make sense to do otherwise. Because let's say, like, hypothetically, I could get away with a system that does half the power of what mine does. But, you know, hashtag first world problems, like you said. This is one of those things where you have to realize that for most people, a 5600X in like a mid-tier graphics card is going to play all the games you want to play without having to overclock or touch anything, unless you really want to be able to show off a number that you can't see. It's not going to affect your gameplay. Now, if you're making, let's say you're making 46 FPS because you're running, let's say, an X58, right? Let's say you're running a much older, or like a bulldozer platform.
Right.
Let's say you're running an older platform and you're able to overclock it and get over 60. Then yes, overclocking could make sense. But for most users that are getting the FPS that their monitor can display, overclocking is only going to add an insurmountable amount of heat, power draw, and all that, and extra stress on your components. That's not really necessary because you're going to be able to play the games just as well, and that marginal benefit you're going to get just isn't there. I mean, you're going to get a higher number you can see, but you're not going to be able to visually see that because when you have, like, let's say a 120 hertz display, it can draw 120 frames in a second. It can't draw 180 or 200.
Right.
It simply can't do it.
Well, and that you've got the same thing with so much of the new technology. You got the big push right now for ray tracing, and I've been a consistent person to say ray tracing is really cool technology. It's been around, by the way, since I got started in this. It's an old technology.
Well, ray tracing was used for film tech and all kinds of things. It's not
in the 70s. It was being used.
Well, ray tracing, yeah, it's used for far more than just gaming. Gaming is a very new thing for ray tracing.
Well, in gaming, I try to get people to understand. Look at the demos they use to show you how cool ray tracing looks. It is very specifically designed. These demos are, because they have to be. Because if you showed them in regular gameplay, you'd go, I can't see the difference in that.
For the most part, yeah. There may be small scenes, like, one level in a game where it does great on ray tracing, but the problem is, are you going to buy into something that's so heavily against being a budget item just to have that one level have a 5% uplift in visual fidelity? I mean, like, for instance, being able to see the reflection of neon lights. Good example, Cyberpunk's coming up. Cyberpunk, I saw a great scene of ray tracing, and the only difference was, like, the water on the floor, like, reflected the neon lights up in the sides. And I'm like, my gaming experience would not be horrible if I never knew that existed. I would never look at that and go, I really cannot. My immersion in this environment is completely broken because I cannot see the damn reflection of these neon signs.
You know what?
I've never done that.
That is so funny, because if you go back to the early days of PC gaming when 3D graphics took off, the big selling point of a new game was the water. The water. Look at the water, and we were always like, who cares? We're not going to stand around and look at the water while we're playing the game.
Maybe not you. I stood in crisis looking at the water for at least 30 seconds.
I did. There was a game when Lord of the Rings Online came out, because I'm a huge fantasy geek. And when Lord of the Rings Online came out, Doug and I were playing that together, and we stood on the Brandywine Bridge, because it was the Brandywine Bridge. We stood on the Brandywine Bridge for probably about 30 minutes geeking out.
That's awesome.
There are so many cool experiences like that in gaming. Hey, guys, we've reached the 30-minute mark already. I'm going to open this up. We've got a lot of comments, but I'm going to open this up to questions. If you have any questions for me and Shannon, and no, I'm not going to talk about release dates and MSRPs, so leave me alone now. If you have any questions,
wait, I don't know them. Damn it. Hey, Ed, can you tell me so I can talk about it?
Yeah, we'll talk about it later, man. Make sure that $100 bill's on the way, man.
$100? Damn, you're the cheapest date I've ever found in a while.
Hey, dude, I may be cheap, but I ain't easy.
Well, you know that. I mean, I've hung out with you around hotels, just saying, like in Portland.
We could tell you guys so many stories.
You guys ever get a chance to hang out with Ed at a show or something, go buy this man like a burger or a sandwich and sit down and listen to some of his old Navy stories.
Oh, Lord.
It is a kick and a half. It is fantastic.
Dude, that was a fun night. I tell you what, though, and it was a shame you weren't there. The last couple of times I went to PDX Land, I've been with His game tag is Kevlar Condom.
Yeah, Adam.
And he took us out to the Brazilian steakhouse. First time I ever ate at a Brazilian steakhouse. Just incredible, just amazing. But it was just so funny because they're all getting drunk and they're all having a good. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're all having a good time. I'm trying not to because I'm working the event. And it was just so funny. They're like, "We're gonna order Jägermeisters." I'd never had a Jägermeister before.
Oh yes.
Or Jaeger bomb. So they ordered me
Well,
a
yeah,
Jaeger
I
bomb.
knew what you were saying.
They ordered me a Jaeger bomb, and they're like, "Okay, now you got to slug this. Okay, you got to just slam this thing when you go."
Yep.
Okay. So I slammed it, and they all sat there for like 5 minutes looking at me, and I'm like, "That was pretty good." Kind of another. Oh well, it was a fun night. It was a blast.
That is, dude. You ever get a chance to hang out with that dude? Adam's a great guy.
Adam's a great guy. I love Adam. Thumper asked you a question, Shannon. Any new cases in 2021? Just a yes or no. No specifics. That you don't violate NDAs.
No, I don't mind. I always allude to stuff. I'm kind of my company knew what they were getting in for. A good friend of mine actually works there that hired me, and I told him, I'm like, you know what you're getting in for, because I'm gonna leak shit all the time. So it's, God, I can't stop cussing. I'm a sailor just like Ed. I don't know. I can say with absolute certainty that we are working on some things. Absolutely. We're looking at refreshing some top line items. We're looking at I'm definitely trying to get some feedback into things. I'm definitely trying to help I'm trying to help make sure we get some really cool stuff. I think over the next year you will see some cool releases. We actually just released the 802 just a few days ago, which is an upgrade to the 801. Basically allows you to swap between silence and airflow. You will see more direction toward airflow focused cases, just because, especially with new high TDP parts like the new Ryzen 5000 series and the fact that they're TDP flex a bit, and you get like those boosts where you can really pump some heat. We're trying to really push our focus toward still having the silence aspect, but having the option for those who need it to be able to increase airflow as well. So you will see that, but we're working on some really cool new stuff. It's just a matter of how quickly we can get it done, because one thing with BeQuiet, we don't cram out 30 new products a year. We push out, we will, when I say push out, I mean, we will put out to the world several new products a year, but most likely every year it's less than 10, simply because stuff I'm talking about now could easily take 2 years, because I've already, just being here just a few months, I have seen products literally reverse back to the drawing board because we find some small thing we don't necessarily like. And I greatly appreciate that versus the approach of hell with it. We already spent this time, push it forward and just get it out. It's a much better way of doing it. But yes, we should. Long story short, we should have some new chassis coming out this next year. As far as when, I can't be 100% sure, but they're definitely, I think we'll have at least one, if not a couple.
Okay, Cache of Legends asks, of all of BeQuiet's product lines, fans, coolers, cases, PSUs, what do you feel still has the biggest opportunity for innovation? I think that's a great question, by the way.
All of them, actually. I believe that everything should be constantly innovating. And that's just my own personal feeling, and I'm sure Ed in some way can agree with this once I explain that everything, if you're not innovating, you're just creating another Me Too product. You're creating, when I say Me Too product, that's basically means everyone else is making one, let's make one too.
Yeah, but
you should always be. Go ahead.
There's a point reached with some of these where innovation becomes really difficult.
Oh yeah, cases are a perfect example.
Oh,
cases, because you've heard the term. How many different ways can you make a rectangle box that fits computer hardware?
Yes. Well, cases. PSUs. Now, I'm really interested in some of the renovations we're looking at. This thing by Intel,
12VO. 12VO.
The 12VO, especially for small form factor builds. The concept of 12VO, I mean, think about it. The only thing you have coming off this power supply is a single motherboard cable, possibly 2 cables for
Ancillary.
the graphics card.
Possibly, yes. But the thing.
And then what? Maybe a SATA?
No, the SATA and everything comes off the board. But there's a problem with small form factor. Remember, now all the DC to DC regulation, the circuitry, is all built onto the motherboard. So on a small form factor build, that's actually going to be a problem, because instead of your PSU doing DC to DC, where you get your 3.3 volt, your 5 volt rails, all that
Right.
stuff. All those step downs are now handled on the motherboard, which means now, think about it, like your mini ITX system, right? You struggle to fit all the components doing a PCB layout.
You do.
Now you're adding power circuitry to the board just to do
Do
that DC to DC.
do you
That
need
is going to be problematic.
do you need the power circuitry? That's the question.
Yes,
Because
you
the
do.
only thing you need on a motherboard is 12 volt, right?
Yes, but no, you need 3.3 and you need 5 volt. There's several items, like for instance, your RAM. All those step downs have to happen in
Okay.
order to power RAM, in order to power your PLLs, in order to power like your PCIe, your PEX voltage, like your PEX rail. All that stuff all require different step downs and different voltage regulators.
What about the stuff we've seen from Zolman, where they've got the power supply basically as one cable, and then it goes to a breakout box? What do you think of that?
I think you mean the I think that was the
I saw it on
oh good.
Linus.
Yeah, no, that was not Zalman. That was
Or not Zolman, that
Seasonic.
was
Seasonic.
Seasonic, yes, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's your 12 volt. That's basically all of your stuff going there that have specific power signals. Then they split out from that little like branch to power everything. But once again, that's not 12VO. 12VO is coming, but first you're going to see it like in OEMs and things like that.
Right.
You won't see it in regular everyday desktop PC for a little while, but it is coming. And that's the thing. Like there are actually like concept motherboards I've seen that have the power circuitry, and like imagine what Ed, when we would talk about motherboards, remember the up top right where like you have power buttons and all that stuff
Yes.
for like OC boards? Imagine that, but instead you see inductors, MOSFETs, bridges, all these different things there in that area, because you have to have that power exchange circuitry, the things to generate those
Okay.
other voltages built on the motherboard.
Well, that's got me wondering, because in small form factor builds there is a I'm trying to remember what it's called. I don't think it's called the Flex. I could be wrong. It's basically a little circuit board, and it actually gets its power from a brick, and then it puts out the 24 pin and the 8/6 and everything else.
Yep.
That's essentially, if I'm understanding you right, that's essentially just the controller to do the breakdowns as needed, right? That's not an actual power supply.
That is technically, it's a small version of a breakdown of like a basic power supply. But the thing is, whenever you're talking like, let's take a good example. Let's say you had Z490 today, or like your X570.
Right.
Either one of those, if they were 12VO, I would say about 12 to 16% of the motherboard's PCB, maybe let's say 8 to 10% of the motherboard PCB space would be dedicated to power circuitry for conversion.
Okay.
So when you think about how stuff can fit right now, basically you're going to lose, either you're going to have, also you're going to have higher PCB count, like higher PCB layer count on the board in order to handle that, because once you have that kind of stuff, you also get more noise, you have signal integrity can come into play. That's where you're going to have some potential issues, and you're going to have more PCB layers for your layout design in order to isolate things that are sensitive, like for instance, your memory trace layout that are very sensitive to noise. That's where, remember, that's right, that for the most systems, that's going to be right next to your like memory slots. So you're going to have a lot of isolation there to keep that power circuit separate. And that's where it might be like, remember back in the day, Ed, like right around Z68, like Z77-ish,
right,
when they had like the Asus ITX board where the VRM actually stood up vertical off the board.
Yes.
Like it stood up vertical, and that was because they wanted a high-end VRM on a mini ITX system. Imagine you're probably going to see like secondary cards or daughter boards like that hardwired to the board for small form factor systems.
Okay.
To handle that regulation circuitry. I can't say for sure. That's just my brain hypothetically. How would I do it? If I was doing layout design for them, that's probably how I would handle that. For regular motherboards, it'll probably be easier because they'll have like a they'll have like a heat dissipation plate.
Well,
they can even use some rear PCB space.
Half the space on an ITX or ATX motherboard.
Well, ATX motherboard, that's true on some circumstances. Like on a lower end board, there's a lot of open PCB space because they don't have the features to cover it. But if you're talking high end board, like let's say, for instance, my system, it's a 3900 XT with a MSI Godlike X570. I
Okay.
actually just recently swapped to that because my 9900K died. That's another story for another time. But that, well, I'll tell you that in a moment because they were discussing part failure. I'll actually tell you how that one's a weird one. But this board, it has a lot of features. They actually have the LAN control chip on the rear of the board because they ran out of PCB layout space, so they had to use the rear of the board. That's what I was saying just a second ago, was you may have like heat plates or cold plates on the rear that the power circuitry can live on the back of the ATX
Right.
board or something like that in order to have that separation and still be able to fit some features. But you will need more layers, which means the cost of boards will likely go up because of that. So you'll be shifting it from the PSU to the motherboard side, basically.
Well, they already went up. Look what happened with the B550 launch.
Dude.
You could pick up B450 ITX motherboards, and I'm talking specifically small form factor world. You could pick up B450 ITX motherboards for like $120. But the B550, the minimum price, with the exception of an ASRock super cheap model that I'd recommend no gamer buy, but they're $180 and up now.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I know. Like a good example, like I've for one of the first times in a while, I actually saw mainstream on Z490. Well, even on X570, mainstream boards are now reaching the $1,000 mark. Remember when HEDT was pushing 600-700 and everyone was getting pissed at it? Now mainstream boards, like you look at like the Z490, like I have a bunch of Z490 boards. I have the Aorus Extreme or like the Maximus Extreme. Those are $800 to $1,000 boards.
Visa's asking, might we see more external PSUs? That's what I was kind of talking about. There is, and remember the system I took to the first PDX LAN, the little system Josh Schniffen built.
Yes.
That basically uses what is essentially a breakout card inside the case, and it hooks to an external power supply. I just saw one that supports up to 750 watts in that breakout board, but it uses 2 bricks.
Yep.
To be able to achieve
and that's because
the biggest brick you can get's like 400 watts.
Well, the reason they're doing that is because they're able to do like 19.5 volts on those bricks.
Yes.
And then it goes in and breaks it down, because the thing a lot of people don't understand is you can push more wattage by pushing a higher voltage out of the brick. Once you get down to your breakdown components, like that external, like the separate card, that card breaks it down to the voltage as needed. But once you're pushing at that higher voltage, you're able to actually deliver more 12-volt wattage. And that's how they're able to do it. And I do think that we will see some external and some creative solutions. But however, like these ITX boards, if they're going to be 12 VO, they've got to come in the box. They can't be like, oh, you have to buy the separate item for the board to work.
Right.
Which means that they're going to have a hardened solution. You're gonna have a solution there ready to go on that board. You can't give them a board that's like, here, this still uses the old connectors and you have to have the separate breakout card for it. I don't think that would be a good solution, because most people, if you're building a small form factor system, you don't have a ton of space to add a totally separate power supply card, which means it's going to have to come integrated with the board or in some way where it will fit within that ITX space. Otherwise, you're going to lose the market. A lot of people are going to look at it and go, now I have to mount, like, let's say, even if they make it like the size of a 2.5 SSD, where are you going to mount that card? How's it going to make sense? All that stuff. That's all stuff that these motherboard manufacturers have to figure out.
Well, every time we've seen breakout solutions for the PC, I think they look really neat, but they end up ultimately failing. You go back to the late 90s, IBM introduced, basically you had a tower that sat on the floor that had nothing. You look at it, it had nothing. It had one big, like an audio snake cable that came out of it. And then there was a box that sat under your monitor, and that connected to that. And on that box was your keyboard, your mouse hookup, your serial port, your parallel port. That's how old that was. Your VGA connector was all on that box. And the concept was that this would be easier to get to. It would be easier to use. But every time you do a breakout solution, you actually increase the amount of desk space you've got to use.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing a lot of people, once again, they don't understand, is they think, oh, we can just add this external adapter to do this, that, the other. Well, you have to consider these kind of things, because once again, when you're building, like, good example, Ed, you love small form factor systems. Yes. I know you do, because I've seen you build like a ton of them. What good is it if you're building a small form factor, small footprint system, like a DAN case or what have you, but then you have 3 large chunks that are going to have to be lugged along with it? Because you've had those power bricks, those 400-watt power bricks.
Yes.
They weigh several pounds a piece.
And they put out a lot of heat.
They do. And so you have to be realistic, and you have to understand that, hey, people aren't going to want to deal with that. Same way you have like these massive gaming laptops that use those same power bricks. A lot of times those gaming laptops are 12 pounds. It's no longer a laptop. It's a desktop that you shoved inside a small chassis and made it really thermally constrained. Congratulations. But
And
it doesn't.
well, I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say also, Visa, you got to realize we don't need super high end power wattage in an ITX system. An ITX
Yeah.
system, by its very nature, is going to use a lower wattage system. You've got less cooling. You've got to work with all that, and we've already got a good 700 and 750 and now 850 watt ITX SFX power supply.
Yep.
So we've got more than enough power. The average computer, the average small form factor gaming computer, can run on a 600 watt power supply, and it's fine.
Ed,
I run on
you need
550.
to you need to tell that to Azrock, because I have sitting next to me an ITX X299 board. Trust me, how does that only go? If you build it, they will come. Like, they straight up, like it's like ITX. Okay, let's see if we could fit a 7980XE in that. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, I feel like we also need to come back from this whole you need everything in a tiny form factor system.
Yeah.
Because I had someone complain. I saw that when 3090 launched. I'm not trying to talk about the GPUs, but just to make it clear, the first thing people said is that's too big for an ITX system. And I'm like, my brain just went like, what? Like, who the hell is thinking about putting a 1500 or whatever card in an ITX system that's made to be small, efficient, like mostly
Well,
quiet for most people?
it's not just that. I watch people complaining, well, why can't I fit an MATX board in it? It was designed for an ITX board. What the hell you trying to do? Well, why can't I put a full-size power supply in it? Dude, I've got cases. Won't give any names, but I've got a case. It's designed for an ITX board. It's a little bigger than a small form factor build, but it was designed for an ATX power supply, which I think, by the way, in small form factor cases is dumb. Okay, I think it's dumb. But the problem
if your focus is minimum footprint, yeah, I could totally see that.
The problem they had is it ended up, no, it wasn't, but okay.
It wasn't Rocket. I'm pretty sure I know who he's talking about. I'm pretty sure I know already.
The gap between the video card and the ATX power supply was measured in millimeters. It was really tiny. And all I did was put an SFX power supply in it, and suddenly the video card could breathe.
Yeah.
It was a simple solution. You've got that. You've got another brand. I've actually posted pictures of the build I did in it. That they designed it and bragged about the fact it fits an ATX power supply. You put an ATX power supply in it, it creates all sorts of limitations. You put an ITX power supply in it, it works really well.
Yeah.
And it's when you build small form factor, your goal is typically not to build the biggest, most badass PC you can build. Your goal is to build, in my opinion, your goal is to build, for most people, a system that'll fit my needs and take up as little space as it can take up.
Well, that's the thing. It's all about efficiency. It's all about efficient use of space. So when you throw in and you take what ideally should be a small form factor by its name,
Rocket's
by its nature,
really trying to get me to tell what it was.
What does it matter? Say it. I don't care. What are you gonna do? Be ostracized by them?
That's got
if you don't like the case, who the hell?
That was a fractal design defined nano.
Ah, yes.
The power supply was just dumb. They should have went with an SFX power supply. The case. It's a great case if you understand how to build in it. The other case I was talking about was the Cougar QBX.
Yep.
Which, again, once you get away from that ATX power supply and you focus on the ITX, you've got a lot more room to work with things.
Well, don't forget their newest one, the Era, as well.
Oh no! I'm gonna be nice to Fractal and not mention that case. You know what? And everybody does it. Okay, I want to make that clear. Every company has a moment where they have made a product that they look back at and go, "Well, that wasn't real smart."
The reason I bring up, and I'll say it then. The reason I bring up the Era was because that was something that was a beautiful case.
Yep. It looks
but
gorgeous.
but you don't want to run a GPU in it
Well, that's like
because the GPU is right against the floor. It does not get any airflow, and if you run even a halfway competent GPU, it's bad juju.
what was that in-win case? It was like rounded aluminum with glass everywhere, and the air intake was like this pocket.
Oh, the Inman 909.
Okay, so my wife saw that case right after they introduced it at PDX Land. I don't know if you recall that. My wife saw that case and fell in love. She's like, I've got to have that case. That's the case I want. So I contacted InWin and I have him send me the case. And this, by the way, ends up being something I have found that happens across the spectrum. The prettier a case is, the bigger pain in the ass it is to work in.
Well, not just that; it's also more limited it is for airflow most of the time because most
that
of the
thing's
time
a disaster.
when you have sleek, and that's one thing. Don't get me wrong, guys. I'm not just gonna sit here and pimp my brand. BeQuiet has made their own fuck ups as far as like excuse the language, but as far as like screwing up designs for certain things, we all learn. In every
Yes.
case company, I was at Thermaltake. We've all learned about it over the years. You always try something, just like the people that make these beautiful all tempered glass cubes. They're damn beautiful, but good luck cooling anything in them. I mean, it's just you have to find that balance, and that's what we're seeing right now is finding that aesthetic versus performance balance.
Yes. Guys, we've only got about 5 minutes left. If you've got a question,
oh damn
Shannon,
it. Do we? I haven't even watched the questions. Holy crap! Oh god.
there's a lot of comments. There's not a lot of questions.
Guys, if you posted a question and we haven't answered it, please repost it or something, because
Yeah, we'll be scrolling back up forever. By the way, thank you guys.
Oh,
the activity level's been outstanding. Thank you. By the way, if you think this one is fun, I won't tell you guys who, but I've already got the guests lined up for December. And I'll tell you this, he's one of the few people in the industry that's almost as old as I am and been doing this almost as long and is still active. They'll know the name when I say it.
I'm just trying to think of who that would be. Because I mean, dude, you're one step away from having like Moses's beeper number. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Dude, seriously. Okay, when they invented Pong, I was old.
Just so you guys understand, he was the guy with the flags waving people onto like Noah's Ark as the unicorns missed the ride. That's by the way, guys. That's why we don't have dinosaurs and unicorns. Is because Ed never told them to come. We could have had Godzilla, but no. Ed didn't welcome them on the boat.
Well, I wanted the unicorns on, but the zebras got there first.
You never told them. Never mind. I'm not going to go there.
No, seriously.
How did this happen? How did we end up here?
I have done breakout groups. I did one at QuakeCon. It was amazing. I've done breakout groups where I've talked about 40 plus years of computer gaming. I love doing that where we can go back and talk how we got to where we are. Those are fun to me. Okay, Shannon, you're getting your questions.
Okay, so first of all, I want to take breaking dimes. I'll just go down the list. He said, recently I saw that BeQuiet recently I saw that BeQuiet recently released the Fear Loop series of areas.
Do I need to get LeVar Burton come here and teach you how to read?
My question, well, no, it's just the redundancy of recently and recently bugged me because my OCD ADHD is bugging me. My question is, what are the downsides of putting the pump in between the radiator and the water block besides noise? Well, actually, the noise is actually not a downside. It actually absorbs it. And there's not inherently a downside really to it. I mean, it's just a different way of doing it because by putting it in the pump head, obviously you're consolidating everything into one place. The one downside would be is that you got a cable coming off of that, but it's only a couple inches away from the radiator. So you do have that separate cable. That would probably be the only one that really would be, I consider it a downside, but even that with, I mean, a few seconds of cable management, it's not a downside,
right.
But you got that. I don't really see a downside beyond that because there is not a noise downside because the rubber tube, if there was noise by the pump, would absorb most of it, and there really isn't from what I've seen. Now, I'm just going to excuse the term, but rocket through these. So Rocket says, what about graphene on coolers? Is that going to be a thing? And do you have any thoughts on cases which have vertical airflow layouts? Okay, first of all, graphene on coolers. I think it will be a thing eventually, not at this point. Just keep your eyes peeled. I think it'll come down the road. Cases with vertical airflow, I see no issue with that. Chimney designs are perfectly fine as long as they're laid out correctly,
I
and
I
as
want
long
to
as the person building understands on that. Go ahead, Ed.
I want to jump in on the vertical airflow thing.
Sure.
Logic and physics tells us hot air rises, and that's true. However, when you're dealing with airflow, just as when you're dealing with water, the path of least resistance is where that air wants to go. And if you've got fans pulling or pushing in a direction, that will overcome easily, by the way, that natural tendency to rise. So vertical airflow is cool, and if properly set up, it works great, but it's really not much better than other airflow solutions.
Yeah, it's a different way of doing it. That's it. Now
So
I'm gonna. Are you cool? Are you cool with ending that one?
no, go ahead. We'll go
Okay.
ahead for a little bit.
Cache of Legends said most PSUs are made by a few manufacturers and just spec'd by companies. Does BeQuiet make their own PSUs? That's an excellent question. And no, for the most part, they are not. They are made by us as far as designed. We have a very strict control on how we design them, but we do use external companies that we have great trust relationships with to create our PSUs, because PSUs are made by only a few places like CWT,
Great
whether it's
Wall,
channel CWT, Great Wall. Great Wall is more, they do a lot more of the mainstream stuff, but they do make some decent products.
Superflower,
Um, FSP, Superflower, um,
Seasonic.
yeah, Seasonic, and I think that's just about most of them. But we just like most PSUs, most companies that sell PSUs, besides like obviously Seasonic or like Superflower now starting to sell their own consumer.
Right.
Like EVGA's high-end units were Superflower for a decent amount of time. Some of them still are. Whereas, and they're a great supplier, and we do work with a lot of top-end suppliers for that. So no, we do not directly, like, we don't produce them. We don't have the manufacturing for them. That's not something we're even interested in getting into,
And most
because,
companies don't.
well, that's because it would be an uphill battle to try to catch these other companies that are already
Yes.
established. It makes more sense to have that partnership.
I'm,
Same way that like certain companies use Sapphire to make their cards.
yes. I'm going to take Thumper's question real quick, or comment. Get off my lawn. Okay, go ahead.
Trust me, Ed's been get off my lawn guy for a long time since I've known him. He's I don't think, like I said, I think he was originally like OG Moses kind of thing. I think Ed's kind of like a vampire. He'll never age. He's just going to always be the old guy. I think he was old I think when all the dust came together to create our universe, I think Ed was created out of old man dust, and he just kind of is going to be here forever.
I'm trying to
So,
find investors to make a gamer's retirement home.
Soldier 76. Jesus. Okay. Let's see. Breaking Dimes. I watched a few reviews mentioning it is louder than other designs. If you're talking about the Pure Loop, I have seen those as well. Most of them, they're mentioning that because they manually set the fan speed to 100%, and that is something we actually designed in. We have high-speed fans on those. They will if you turn them up to 100%, but at the end of the day, if you're using it as intended on PWM, it's going to be quieter than most AIOs you'll see. But if you manually crank the fans, we have it that way in case you're running like the wrong size cooler, like let's say a 120 mil on like a really high TDP processor. It will at least ramp up and try to make sure that your bad decision will hopefully still survive or not sit there and throttle. Jones Boy U5. I'm guessing that's a reply to someone. I love when people call FSP a no-name brand.
They're not. No.
They're not. No, not at all. FSP is actually an extremely good PSU supplier. I've used direct FSP supplies before. I've had several of them. I've worked with the people at FSP over the years. They are a very astute brand.
But after watching
they
this
are in
video,
no way a
you will be
no-name
able
brand or a bad PSU manufacturer. They make some stellar PSU options. They really do.
By the way, the guy's asking about the noise level with the pumps and stuff. There's this excellent video I just posted in chat about
Where's
fan
the pump
curves.
one?
The what?
Well, where was the one
They
about
were
the
saying
fan
about
curve
it
for
being
pump?
louder.
Oh yeah,
I just posted this video. This is an excellent video by one of the guys at BeQuiet about how to create a fan curve that achieves maximum cooling with lowest noise. Great video.
I love that you went and pulled that instead of me. That's fantastic.
Well, dude, this is what I have been doing for 10 plus years with fan curves. Is everybody gets into, they set their case fans up on a curve. I don't set my case fans up on a curve. I go into my case fans. I find the fastest speed I can achieve without creating a noise level I don't want, and I lock them in. and I
Okay.
say cool and quiet.
Yeah, I've actually had people do that with GPUs. I'm like, it's not ideal, but at the end of the day, if it keeps you at thermals and it keeps you at a noise, I
Yes,
think that's at a noise level. I think that's perfectly fine. I don't see an issue with that.
there you go.
Now, I do have a question though. Would it, because I know we're coming up basically on the close of this. We've actually
Yes,
exceeded our time.
that's all right.
Is there a voice chat channel where I can actually jump in with these guys and talk to them if they want to ask me a question? Because
Anytime, if you go down below, we have all sorts of gaming chat channels.
yeah, I see the gaming channels. I wasn't sure if there was just like a chat channel. That's what I was asking.
You can jump into one or two
Okay.
without a concern. That's fine.
Okay.
Those are open to the general public, and anytime you want to chat with everybody, you are more than welcome.
Well, because Breaking Dime said something, and I don't know if it's something we can handle with text versus discussion. He said, was curious because my OC 9900K caused extreme permeation within 6 months on my H150i Pro. And he goes, I let my board handle everything and stays really quiet. So I'm a little confused. I'd really like to kind of get more information so I can better understand what he's talking about. Even though it's not my cooler, I know a lot about that cooler. So
Yes,
I'd really be interested to kind of figure that out because that is kind of funky.
absolutely. You guys are always welcome. You're always welcome to hang out, Shannon. You're a blast. Thank you, by the way, for taking the time to join us today, and thank your wife for letting you come out to play.
Oh, she's working. I actually, you have to thank my squad mates that are waiting for me to join them at PUBG. I was about to join a game and then my Google alert went off and it's like, hey, you've got a podcast. I'm like, oh shit.
All right. Well, gang, this has been Shannon Robb from BeQuiet joining us today. I'm Ed with Sapphire, and thank you for joining us for this Sapphire Nation podcast. Be sure to watch. We will be announcing the date and time of December's podcast. And like I said, I think you guys are really going to enjoy the
Wait,
guest.
Ed, we're going on a date? All right.
All right.
Are you,
We're
are
out
you,
of here,
are,
guys. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.